Hello friends, I welcome you to tonight's edition of Bedtime Story for Grown-Ups. If you enjoy these readings, I encourage you to subscribe, so you will be notified when a new bedtime story is ready for you. And now, it is time to unwind. Find a place where you can relax. Once you have settled into that place, make yourself comfortable. Take a deep breath. As you exhale, you can feel your muscles relax. Your day has come to an end. There is nothing left to do but to listen to these stories and fall asleep. And so we begin. An Unconventional Confidence. The girl in black and yellow ran frantically down the grey road under the pines. There was nobody to see her, but she would have run if all Halifax had been looking on. For had she not on the loveliest new hat, a creation in yellow chiffon with big black shoe, and a dress to match, and was there not a shower coming straight from the hills across the harbour? Down at the end of the long resinous avenue, the girl saw the shore road, with the pavilion shutting out the view of the harbour's mouth. Below the pavilion, clean-shaven George's Island guarded the town like a sturdy bulldog, and beyond it were the wooded hills, already lost in mist of rain. "Oh, I shall be too late," moaned the girl. But she held her hat steady with one hand and ran on. If she could only reach the pavilion in time. It was a neck-and-neck race between the rain and the girl, but the girl won. Just as she flew out upon the shore road, a tall young man came pelting down the ladder, and they both dashed up the steps of the pavilion together, as the rain swooped down upon them, and blotted George's Island and the smoky town, and the purple banks of the Eastern Passage from view. The pavilion was small at the best of times, and just now the rain was beating into it on two sides, leaving only one dry corner. Into this the girl moved. She was flushed and triumphant. The young man thought that in all his life he had never seen anyone so pretty. "I'm so glad I didn't get my hat wet," said the girl breathlessly, as she straightened it with a careful hand, and wondered if she looked very blown and blousy. "It would have been a pity," admitted the young man. "It is a very pretty hat." "Pretty?" The girl looked the scorn her voice expressed. "Anyone can have a pretty hat. Our cook has one. This is a creation." "Of course," said the young man humbly. "I ought to have known, but I am very stupid." "Well, I suppose a mere man couldn't be expected to understand exactly," said the girl graciously. She smiled at him in a friendly fashion, and he smiled back. The girl thought that she had never seen such lovely brown eyes before. He could not be a Haligonian. She was sure she knew all the nice young men with brown eyes in Halifax. "Please sit down," she said plaintively. "I'm tired." The young man smiled again at the idea of his sitting down, because the girl was tired. But he sat down, and so did she, on the only dry seat to be found. "Goodness knows how long this rain will last," said the girl. making herself comfortable and picturesque. But I shall stay here until it clears up, if it rains for a week. I will not have my hat spoiled. I suppose I shouldn't have put it on. Beatrix said it was going to rain. Beatrix is such a horribly good prophet. I detest people who are good prophets, don't you? I think that they are responsible for all the evils that they predict, said the young man solemnly. That is just what I told Beatrix, and I was determined to put on this hat and come out to the park today. I simply had to be alone, and I knew I'd be alone out here. Everybody else would be at the football game. By the way, why aren't you there? I wasn't even aware that there was a football game on hand, said the young man, as if he knew he ought to be ashamed of his ignorance, and was. Dear me, said the girl pityingly. Where can you have been not to have heard of it? It's between the Dalhousie team and the Wanderers. Almost everybody here is on the Wanderers' side, because they are Haligonians, but I am not. I like the college boys best. Beatrix says that it is just because of my innate contrariness. Last year I simply screamed myself hoarse with enthusiasm. The Dalhousie team won the trophy. If you are so interested in the game, it is a wonder you didn't go to see it yourself, said the young man boldly. Well, I just couldn't, said the girl with a sigh. If anybody had ever told me that there would be a football game in Halifax, and that I would elect to prowl about by myself in the park instead of going to it, I'd have laughed them to scorn. Even Beatrix would never have dared to prophesy that. But you see, it has happened. I was too crumpled up in my mind to care about football today. I had to come here and have it out with myself, and that is why I put on my hat. I thought perhaps I might get through with my mental gymnastics in time to go to the game afterwards. But I didn't. It is just maddening, too. I got this hat and dress on purpose to wear to it. They are black and yellow, you see, the Dalhousie colors. It was my own idea. I was sure it would make a sensation. But I couldn't go to the game and take any interest in it, feeling as I do. Could I now? The young man said, of course she couldn't. It was utterly out of the question. The girl smiled. Without a smile, she was charming. With a smile, she was adorable. I like to have my opinions bolstered up. Do you know, I want to tell you something. May I? You may. I'll never tell anyone as long as I live, said the young man solemnly. I don't know you, and you don't know me. That is why I want to tell you about it. I must tell somebody, and if I told anybody I knew, they'd tell it all over Halifax. It is dreadful to be talking to you like this. Beatrix would have 3 fits, one after the other, if she saw me. But Beatrix is a slave to conventionality. I glory in discarding it at times. You don't mind, do you? Not at all, said the young man sincerely. The girl sighed. I have reached that point where I must have a confidant or go crazy. Once I could tell things to Beatrix. That was before she got engaged. Now she tells everything to him. There is no earthly way of preventing her. I've tried them all. So nowadays, when I get into trouble, I tell it out loud to myself in the glass. It's a relief, you know, but that is no good now. I want to tell it to somebody who can say things back. Will you promise to say things back? The young man assured her that he would, when the proper time came. Very well, but please don't look at me while I'm telling you. I'll be sure to blush in places. When Beatrix wants to be particularly aggravating, she says I have lost the art of blushing. But that is only her way of putting it, you know. Sometimes I blush dreadfully. The young man dragged his eyes from the face under the black and yellow hat, and fastened them on a crooked pine tree that hung out over the bank. "Well," began the girl, "the root of the whole trouble is simply this. There is a young man in England. I always think of him as the creature. He is the son of a man who was father's especial crony in boyhood, before father emigrated to Canada. Worse than that, he has come of a family which has contracted a vile habit of marrying into our family. It has come down through the ages so long that it has become chronic. Father left most of his musty traditions in England, but he brought this pet one with him. He and his friend agreed that the latter's son should marry one of father's daughters. It ought to have been Beatrix. She is the oldest. But Beatrix had a pug nose, so father settled on me. From my earliest recollection, I have been given to understand that just as soon as I grew up, there would be a ready-made husband imported from England for me. I was doomed to it from my cradle. Now," said the girl, with a tragic gesture, "I ask you, could anything be more hopelessly, appallingly stupid, and devoid of romance than that?" The young man shook his head, but did not look at her. "It's pretty bad," he admitted. "You see," said the girl pathetically, "the shadow of it has been over my whole life. Of course, when I was a very little girl, I didn't mind it so much. It was such a long way off, and lots of things might happen. The creature might run away with some other girl, or I might have the smallpox, or Beatrix's nose might be straight when she grew up. And if Beatrix's nose were straight, she'd be a great deal prettier than I am. But nothing did happen, and her nose is puggier than ever. Then, when I grew up, things were horrid. I never could have a single little bit of fun, and Beatrix had such a good time. She had scores of lovers, in spite of her nose. To be sure, she's engaged now, and he's a horrid, fatty little creature. But he is her own choice. She wasn't told that there was a man in England whom she must marry by and by, when he got sufficiently reconciled to the idea to come and ask her. Oh, it makes me furious." Is there anyone else?" asked the young man hesitatingly. "Oh, dear, no. How could there be? Why, you know, I couldn't have the tiniest flirtation with another man when I was as good as engaged to the creature. That is one of my grievances. Just think how much fun I've missed. I used to rage to Beatrix about it, but she would tell me that I ought to be thankful to have the chance of making such a good match. The creature is rich, you know, and clever. As if I cared how clever or rich he is. Beatrix made me so cross that I gave up saying anything and sulked by myself. So they think I'm quite reconciled to it, but I'm not. He might be very nice after all, suggested the young man. Nice? That isn't the point. Oh, don't you see? But no, you're a man. You can't understand. You must just take my word for it. The whole thing makes me furious. But I haven't told you the worst. The creature is on his way out to Canada now. He may arrive here at any minute, and they are all so aggravatingly delighted over it. What do you suppose he feels like?" asked the young man reflectively. "Well," said the girl frankly, I've been too much taken up with my own feelings to worry about his. But I dare say they are pretty much like mine. He must loathe and detest the very thought of me." "Oh, I don't think he does," said the young man gravely. "Don't you? Well, what do you suppose he does think of it all? You ought to understand the man's part of it better than I can. There's as much difference in men as in women," said the young man in an impersonal tone. "I may be right or wrong, you see, but I imagine he would feel something like this. From boyhood he has understood that away out in Canada there is a little girl growing up who is some day to be his wife. She becomes his boyish ideal of all that is good and true. He pictures her as beautiful and winsome and sweet. She is his heart's lady, and the thought of her abides with him as a safeguard and an inspiration. For her sake, he resolves to make the most of himself and live a clean, loyal life. When she comes to him, she must find his heart fit to receive her. There is never a time in all his life when the dream of her does not gleam before him as of a star to which he may aspire with all reverence and love." The young man stopped abruptly and looked at the girl. She bent forward with shining eyes and touched his hand. "You are splendid," she said softly. "If he thought so, but no, I'm sure he doesn't. He's just coming out here like a martyr, going to the stake. He knows he will be expected to propose to me when he gets here, and he knows that I know it too, and he knows and I know that I will be expected to say my very prettiest yes." "But are you going to say it?" asked the young man anxiously. The girl leaned forward. "No, that is my secret. I am going to say a most emphatic no." "But won't your family make an awful row?" "Of course. But I rather enjoy a row now and then. It stirs up one's grey matter so nicely. I came out here this afternoon and thought the whole affair over from beginning to end, and I've determined to say no." "Oh, I wouldn't make it so irreconcilable as that," said the young man lightly. "I'd leave a loophole of escape, you see. If you were to like him a little better than you expect, it would be awkward to have committed yourself by a rash vow to saying no, wouldn't it?" "I suppose it would," said the girl thoughtfully. "But then, you know, I won't change my mind." "It's just as well to be on the safe side," said the young man. The girl got up. The rain was over, and the sun was coming out through the mists. "Perhaps you're right," she said, "so I'll just resolve that I will say no, if I don't want to say yes. That really amounts to the same thing, you know. Thank you so much for letting me tell you all about it. It must have bored you terribly, but it has done me so much good. I feel quite calm and rational now, and can go home and behave myself. Goodbye." "Goodbye," said the young man gravely. He stood on the pavilion and watched the girl out of sight beyond the pines. When the girl got home, she was told that the Lucy team had won the game, 8-4. The girl dragged her hat off and waved it joyously. "What a shame I wasn't there. They'd have gone mad over my dress." But the next item of information crushed her. The creature had arrived. He had called that afternoon and was coming to dinner that night. "How fortunate," said the girl as she went to her room, "that I relieved my mind to that young man out in the park today. If I had come back with all that pent-up feeling seething within me, and heard this news right on top of it all, I might have flown into 1,000 pieces. What lovely brown eyes he had. I do dote on brown eyes. The creature will be sure to have fishy blue ones. When the girl went down to meet the creature, she found herself confronted by the young man. For the first, last, and only time in her life, the girl had not a word to say, but the family thought her confusion very natural and pretty. They really had not expected her to behave so well. As for the young man, his manner was flawless. Toward the end of the dinner, when the girl was beginning to recover herself, he turned to her. "You know, I promised never to tell," he said. "Be sure you don't, then," said the girl meekly. "But aren't you glad you left the loophole?" he persisted. The girl smiled down into her lap. "Perhaps," she said. After many days. The square, bare front room of the Baxter Station Hotel, so called because there was no other house in the place to dispute the title, was filled with men. Some of them were putting up at the hotel while they worked at the new branch line, and some of them had dropped in to exchange news and banter while waiting for the mail train. Gabe Foley, the proprietor, was playing at checkers with one of the railroad men, but was not too deeply absorbed in the game to take in all that was said around him. The air was dim with tobacco smoke, and the brilliant scarlet geraniums, which Mrs. Foley kept in the bay window, looked oddly out of place. Gabe knew all those present except one man, a stranger who had landed at Baxter Station from the afternoon freight. Foley's hotel did not boast of a register, and the stranger did not volunteer any information regarding his name or business. He had put in the afternoon and early evening strolling about the village and talking to the men on the branch line. Now he had come in and ensconced himself in the corner behind the stove, where he preserved a complete silence. He had a rather rough face and was flashily dressed. Altogether, Gabe hardly liked his looks, but as long as a man paid his bill and did not stir up a row, Gabe Foley did not interfere with him. 3 or 4 farmers from out Greenvale Way were drawn up by the stove, discussing the cheese factory sales and various Greenvale happenings. The stranger appeared to be listening to them intently, although he took no part in their conversation. Presently he brought his tilted chair down with a sharp thud. Gabe Foley had paused on his manipulation of a king to hurl a question at the Greenvale man. "Is it true that old man Strong is to be turned out next week?" "True enough," answered William Jeffers. "Joe Moore is going to foreclose. Stephen Strong has got 3 years behind with the interest, and Moore is out of patience. It seems hard on old Stephen, but Moore ain't the man to hesitate for that. He'll have his own out of it." "What will the Strongs do?" asked Gabe. "That's the question everyone in Greenvale is asking. Lizzie Strong has always been a delicate little girl, but maybe she'll manage to scare up a living. Old Stephen is to be the most pitied. I don't see anything for him but the poorhouse." "How did Stephen Strong come to get into such a tight place?" the stranger asked suddenly. "When I was in these parts a good many years ago, He was considered a well-to-do man. "Well, so he was," replied William Jeffers. "But he began to get in debt when his wife took sick. He spent no end of money on doctors and medicines for her. And then he seemed to have a streak of bad luck besides. Crops failed and cows died, and all that sort of thing. He's been going behind ever since. He kind of lost heart when his wife died, and now Moore is going to foreclose. It's my opinion poor old Stephen won't live any time if he's turned out of his home. Do you know what the mortgage comes to? Near 3,000, counting overdue interest." "Well, I'm sorry for old Stephen," said Gabe, returning to his game. "If anybody deserves a peaceful old age, he does. He's helped more people than you could count, and he was the best Christian in Greenville or out of it." "He was too good," said a Greenville man crustily. "He just let himself be imposed upon all his life. There's dozens of people owes him, and he's never asked for a cent from them. And he's always had some shiftless critter or other hanging round and devouring his substance." "Do you mind that Ben Butler, who used to be in Greenville 20 years ago?" asked the third man. "If ever there was an imp of Satan, 'twas him. Old Ezra Butler's son from the valley. Old Stephen kept him for 3 or 4 years, and was good to him, as if he'd been his own son." "Most people out our way do mind Ben Butler," returned William Jeffers grimly, "even if he ain't been heard tell of for 20 years. He wasn't the kind you could forget in a hurry. Where'd he go? Out to Kootenai, wasn't it? Somewhere there. He was a regular young villain, up to every kind of mischief. Old Stephen caught him stealing his oats one time. Instead of giving him a taste of jail for it, as he ought to have done, he just took him right into his family and kept him there for 3 years. I used to tell him he'd be sorry for it, but he always persisted that Ben wasn't bad at heart, and would come out all right some day. No matter what the young varmint did, old Stephen would make excuses for him. His ma was dead, or he hadn't had no bringing up. I was thankful when he did finally clear out without doing some penitentiary work. If poor old Stephen hadn't been so open-handed to every unfortunate critter he came across," said Gabe, "he'd have had more for himself today." The whistle of the mail train cut short the discussion of Stephen Strong's case. In a minute the room was vacant, except for the stranger. When left to himself, he also rose and walked out. Turning away from the station, he struck briskly into Greenville Road. About 3 miles from the station, he halted before a house, built close to the road. It was old-fashioned, but large and comfortable-looking, with big barns in the rear and an orchard on the left slope. The house itself was in the shadow of the firs, but the yard lay out in the moonlight, and the strange visitor did not elect to cross it. Instead, he turned aside into the shadow of the trees around the garden, and, leaning against the old rail fence, gave himself up to contemplation of some kind. There was a light in the kitchen. The window blind was not down, and he had a fairly good view of the room. The only visible occupant was a grey-haired old man, sitting by the table, reading from a large open volume before him. The stranger whistled softly. "That's old Stephen, reading the Bible same as ever. By all that's holy. He hasn't changed much, except that he's got mighty grey. He must be close on to 70. It's a shame to turn an old man like him out of house and home." But Joe Moore always was a genuine skinflint. He drew himself softly up and sat on the fence. He saw old Stephen Strong close his book, place his spectacles on it, and kneel down by his chair. The old man remained on his knees for some time, and then, taking up his candle, left the kitchen. The man on the fence still sat there. Truth to tell, he was chuckling to himself as he recalled all the mischief he had done in the old days. The doubtful jokes, tricks, and escapades he had gone through with. He could not help remembering at the same time how patient old Stephen Strong had always been with him. He recalled the time he had been caught stealing the oats, how frightened and sullen he had been, and how gently the old man had talked to him and pointed out the sin of which he had been guilty. He had never stolen again, but in other respects he had not mended his ways much. Behind old Stephen's back he laughed at him and his preaching, but Stephen Strong had never lost faith in him. He had always asserted mildly that Ben would come out all right by and by. Ben Butler remembered this too, as he sat on the fence. He had always liked old Stephen, he told himself. He was sorry he had fallen on such evil times. Preaching and praying don't seem to have brought him out clear after all, he said with a chuckle that quickly died away. Somehow, even in his worst days, Ben Butler had never felt easy when he mocked old Stephen. $3,000. I could do it, but I reckon I'd be a blamed fool. I ain't a-going to do it. 3,000 ain't picked up every day, even in the Kootenai, especially by chaps like me. He patted his pocket knowingly. 15 years previously, he had gone to the Kootenai district with visions of making a fortune that were quickly dispelled by reality. He had squandered his wages as soon as paid, and it was only of late years that he had pulled up a bit, as he expressed it, and saved his $3,000. He had brought the money home with him, having some vague notion of buying a farm and settling down to do the respectable. But he had already given up the idea. This country was too blamed quiet for him, he said. He would go back to Kootenai, and he knew what he would do with his money. Jake Perkins and Wade Brown, two pals of his, were running a flourishing grocery and saloon combined. They would be glad of another partner with some cash. It would suit him to a T. I'll clear out tomorrow, he mused as he walked back. As long as I stay here, old Stephen will haunt me, sure as fate. Wonder what he was praying for tonight. He always used to say the Lord would provide, but he don't appear to have done it. Well, I ain't his deputy. The next afternoon, Ben Butler went over to Greenvale and called at Stephen Strong's. He found only the old man at home. Old Stephen did not recognize him at first, but made him heartily welcome when he did. Ben, I do declare, Ben Butler, how are you? How are you? Sit down, Ben. Here, take this chair. Where on earth did you come from? Baxter, just now. Kootenai on the large scale, answered Ben. Thought I'd come over and see you again. Didn't expect you'd remember me at all. Remember you? Why, of course I do. I haven't ever forgotten you, Ben. Many's the time I've wondered where you was, and how you was getting on. And you tell me you've been in the Kootenai. Well, well, you have seen a good bit more of the world than I ever have. You've changed a lot, Ben. You ain't a boy no longer. Do you mind all the pranks you used to play? Ben laughed sheepishly. I reckon I do. But it ain't myself I come here to talk about. Not much to say if I did. It's just been up and down with me. How are you yourself, sir? They're telling me over at Baxter that you were kind of in trouble." The old man's face clouded over. All the sparkle went out of his kind blue eyes. "Yes, Ben, yes," he said, with a heavy sigh. "I've kind of gone downhill, that's a fact. The old farm has to go, Ben. I'm sorry for that. I'd have liked to have ended my days here, but it's not to be. I don't want to complain. The Lord does all things well. I haven't a doubt, but that it all fits into his wise purpose. Not a doubt, Ben, although it may be kind of hard to see it." Ben was always skittish of pious talk. He veered around adroitly. "I don't know as the Lord has had much to do with this, sir. Seems to me as if 'twas the other one as was running it, with Joe Moore for deputy. The main thing, as I look at it, is to get a cinch on him. How much does the mortgage amount to, sir?" "About $3,000, interest and all." Old Stephen's voice trembled. The future looked very dark to him in his old age. Ben put his hand inside his coat and brought out a brand-new, plump pocketbook. He opened it, laid it on his knee, and counted out a number of crisp notes. "Here, sir," he said, pushing them along the table. "I reckon that'll keep you out of Joe Moore's clutches. There's 3,000 there, if I ain't made a mistake. That'll see you clear, won't it?" "Ben!" Old Stephen's voice trembled with amazement. "Ben, I can't take it. It wouldn't be fair or right. I could never pay you back." Ben slipped the rubber band around his wallet and replaced it airily. "I don't want it paid back, sir. It's a little gift, so to speak, just to let you know I ain't ungrateful for all you did for me. If it hadn't been for you, I might have been in the penitentiary by now. As for the money, it may seem a pile to you, but we don't think anything more of 1,000 or so in the Kootenai than you Greenville folks do of a $5. Not a bit more. We do things on a big scale out there." "But Ben, are you sure you can afford it? That you won't miss it?" "Pop sure. Don't you worry. I'm all right. Bless you, bless you." The tears were running down old Stephen's face as he gathered up the money with a shaking hand. "I always knew you would do well, Ben. Always said it. I knew you'd a good heart. I just can't realize this yet. It seems too good to be true. The old place saved. I can die in peace. Of course, I'll pay you back some of it, anyhow, if I'm spared a while longer. Bless you, Ben." Ben would not stay long after that. He said he had to leave on the 4:30 train. He was relieved when he got away from the old man's thanks and questions. Ben did not find it easy to answer some of the latter. When he was out of sight of the house, he sat on a fence and counted up his remaining funds. "Just enough to take me back to the Kootenai, and then begin over again, I suppose. But 'twas worth the money to see the old fellow's face. He'd thank the Lord and me," he said. "How Jake and Wade roar to hear them two names in partnership. But I'm going to pull up a bit after this. See if I don't, just to justify the old man's faith in me. 'Twould be too bad to disappoint him if he's believed for so long that I was going to turn out all right yet." When the 4:30 train went out, Ben Butler stood on the rear platform. Gabe Foley watched him abstractedly as he receded. "Blamed if I know who that fellow was," he remarked to a crony. "He never told his name. But seems to me I've seen him before. He has a kind of hangdog look, I think. But he paid up square, and it is none of my business."